A very good morning to all of you today. We are starting with the next topic, which is the structure of the nephron. Now, a nephron is the functional and structural unit of the excretory system inside the kidney. In the last lecture, you learnt about the excretory system overall, and you also learnt the internal structure of the kidney. So, now in this lecture, we will learn the detailed structure of each nephron. So, we have the diagram over here. The same diagram is in your notes as well. The nephron is the part which is highlighted in yellow, and the blood vessels is highlighted in red. So, first of all, the first point, that the kidneys produce urine by their microscopic functional units called the nephrons. Now, see the next statement. In one kidney, you have 1 till 1.2 million. I hope you know 1 million is 10 lakhs. This is per kidney, but your body has 2 kidneys. So, if they ask you a question, number of nephrons in the human body, answer is 2 till 2.4 million. That's too much. Okay. So, in one kidney you have 1 to 1.2 million, and in the human body 2 to 2.4 million. The dimensions of the nephron, it's a long thing. You can't see it, it's very thin and highly coiled. So, the length is around 3 centimeters and the thickness is so fine, 6 microns to 20 microns. Micron is 10 raised to minus 6 meters. So, length is 3 centimeters and the thickness is 6 to 20 micrometers or microns. It is thin walled, highly coiled with a single layer of cells, underline single layer of cells. The proximal end is blind, that means there is no opening. Now, what is the proximal end? The proximal end is the Bowman's capsule. Okay, so the initial part is the Bowman's capsule. So, I am drawing the outline of the Bowman's capsule like this. I have not drawn a gap through which the blood will filter and come through. No, it's a continuous membrane. So, it's blind. Blind means there is no actual big openings. The blood has to filter through that Bowman's capsule. That's why they are saying proximal. Proximal means the first part is blind. Blind means there is no opening. And the distal end will open into a collecting tubule. So, here the distal end will open into a collecting tubule. So, once again, it is a single layer of cells. The proximal end, that is the Bowman's capsule, does not have an actual opening, it is blind. Whereas the distal end of it opens into the collecting tubule. So, what are the basic components of it? You have the Bowman's capsule, which I have drawn. After the Bowman's capsule, you have a renal tubule. The renal tubule, I am giving a black outline for it. Okay. So, the two parts are Bowman's capsule, which I have drawn in blue, and the renal tubule, which arises from the base of the Bowman's capsule. So, here there is a small neck, the junction of the Bowman's capsule and the rest of the nephron, and then after that, can you see this? The part which I am drawing now is the renal tubule. It has different diameters. So, some parts are very thin, some parts are thicker. So can you see this lower part has become very thin? And then again some parts are highly twisted or convoluted into multiple folds. Alright. So now what are the different parts of the renal tubule? The first part of the renal tubule is your proximal convoluted tubule. It is known as PCT. This is an accepted short form for it. So the PCT is the proximal convoluted tubule. It is the first part of the renal tubule. After that, there is a U-shaped structure. That U-shaped structure is called the Henle's loop. So proximal convoluted tubule is also highly coiled. It is highly coiled, and then you have a U-shaped structure called the Henle's loop. So proximal convoluted tubule, I am writing it as A. The Henle's loop, I am writing it as B. This entire U-shaped structure. So the Henle's loop is U-shaped. It enters the medulla region of the kidney. So I am drawing a line now. This line demarcates the junction between the cortex and the medulla. So whatever I am labeling on the board, please do it in your books as well. So what is in the cortex? Not only is this Bowman's capsule, but even the PCT is in the cortex. But now the Henle's loop is in the medulla. It's a U-shaped structure. So initially the urine goes downwards. So the initial part where the urine moves in a downward direction is called the descending limb of the loop of Henle. So urine will first go down and then take a turn at the base. This turn at the base, label this, is the hairpin bend. You know the hairpins are there, the black one. So you put it like this to hold your hair in place. So it looks like that. So the lower turn is called the hairpin bend. And after that, the urine will move upwards. So this part where the urine moves upwards, see the arrow, is called the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. So it has two limbs, a thin walled descending limb and a thick walled ascending limb. Mark these, because later on that changes the permeability. Thin walled descending limb and thick walled ascending limb. It is not permeable to water. Which is not permeable to water? Only ascending limb. And the main function of Henle's loop is concentration of urine. Underline that, that's a very important MCQ. The function is concentration of urine. Now this ascending limb, which is in the medulla, will once again enter the cortex. See, it crosses and comes to the red line. And there again it gets highly coiled to form a distal convoluted tubule. So proximal convoluted tubule, proximal is first, distal is later. So first came your proximal convoluted tubule, then came your Henle's loop, and the C is your distal convoluted tubule, which is also in the cortex. See, that's why I put a red line in a crooked way for you to understand. After re-entering the cortex, the tubule again gets highly coiled to form the distal convoluted tubule. Now the PCT, mark this, if you see the microscopic section, it has a brush border with microvilli to increase the absorption. See, not everything that goes into the urine is bad. Sometimes see, we lose so much of water. To get back the water back into your blood, you have your PCTs and different parts. Even nutrients like glucose, amino acids, which we need. When they enter the urine, the PCT will try and get it back into the blood. To increase the surface area, to increase absorption, PCT has brush border with microvilli. DCT doesn't have it, only PCT has it. Okay, so PCT here will have, write down, brush border with microvilli to increase the surface area, to increase absorption. Finally, the DCT will open into a collecting tubule. So, can you see, from the DCT it enters into the collecting tubule. Many nephrons collecting tubules will now form a collecting duct. See the flow from collecting tubules, it will enter into a collecting duct, and many collecting ducts will then open into, write down over here, the duct of Bellini. There it was column of Bertini, the projections of cortex into the medulla. So, names are similar. So, that is columns of Bertini. Here this is duct of Bellini. Bell, B-E-L-L. And ultimately this duct of Bellini will be here. The duct of Bellini will open at the apex or the papilla, and who will collect it? That minor calyx. The minor calyx will collect the urine from this duct of Bellini. So, duct of Bellini ultimately opens at the apex or the papilla, from where the urine will go into the minor calyx. From the minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis, and into the ureter. So, the Malpighian body, what is Malpighian body? It is a combination of glomerulus, which is blood vessels, and Bowman's capsule. This combination of glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, this is the filtering apparatus, is called the Malpighian body. So, label this as Malpighian body or Malpighian corpuscle. So, Malpighian body, that is glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, PCT and DCT lie in the cortex. I have shown all of it in the cortical region. Once again, Malpighian body, which is glomerulus, Bowman's capsule, PCT and DCT lie in the cortex. So, what lies in the medulla? Henle's loop. The entire tubule is now embedded in capillaries. So, now understand the next part of it. If you look closely in the diagram, that glomerulus has two blood vessels coming from top. So, there is one blood vessel which gets the blood into each nephron, that is called the afferent arteriole with an A. Now, do you know English language? You have learnt about the alphabets when you all were in nursery, A, B, C, D, E. Which one comes first? A. So, A comes first, afferent comes first. So, afferent comes into the kidneys, efferent goes out. Afferent comes into the nephron and efferent leaves that particular area. So, afferent arteriole is over here. It carries the blood into the Bowman's capsule, and efferent comes out of it. The efferent does not stop there. The story is not over. The efferent continues as a full network of capillaries. So if you see everywhere you have those red lines, even on the Henle's loop, even around the PCT, little bit on the DCT. So understand that those capillaries are called the peritubular capillaries. They form a network around the renal tubule. A portion of the peritubular capillaries which is around the Henle's loop is called vasa recta. What is it called? Vasa recta. So, a minute blood vessel of peritubular capillaries which runs parallel to the Henle's loop forms a U-shaped structure called the vasa recta. So, we have completed the structure of the nephron. We will revise it once again. First, the structural and functional unit of each kidney is called a nephron. This is the nephron image. There are about 1 to 1.2 million nephrons in one kidney. Therefore, in the human body 2 till 2.4 million nephrons. Length is around 3 centimeters and the diameter is 6 to 20 microns. It has a single layer of cells. The proximal part is the Bowman's capsule, which is blind, means there is no actual hole. The blood from this glomerulus blood vessels will filter and go into the Bowman's capsule through the cells. The cells will act as a filter. From the Bowman's capsule, it now enters into the renal tubule, which has A, B, C parts. The first A part is the PCT, the proximal convoluted tubule. From the proximal convoluted tubule, it now enters into the Henle's loop. The Henle's loop lies in the medulla. This Henle's loop has the first part, the descending limb. Next is the turn, the hairpin bend, and the part which comes above is the ascending limb. The ascending limb is impermeable to water. So, here next to ascending limb, it is impermeable to water. And finally, from the ascending limb, it goes into the DCT, which is also in the cortex. So, what all is there in the cortex? The Malpighian body, which has glomerulus Bowman's capsule. The PCT and the DCT lie in the cortex, but the Henle's loop lies in the medulla. From the DCT, from the distal convoluted tubule, the urine will go into its collecting tubule. Many collecting tubules will join together to form the collecting ducts, and finally the ducts will form one duct of Bellini. That duct of Bellini will now open into the apex or the papilla of the pyramid, and from there the urine will be collected by the minor calyx, major calyx, pelvis, and then into the ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, and out of the body. So, this is the structure of the nephron. So, children, this is an image which I had drawn on the board. It's a most simplified image. I have opened up everything so that you can come to know about the different parts. So, as you see, I have drawn a black line over here to demarcate between cortex and medulla. Okay. So, what lies above the line? All these things are in the cortex. What is below is in the medulla. So, let us see the first. What is the Malpighian corpuscle? The Malpighian corpuscle consists of two parts, glomerulus and Bowman's capsule. The glomerulus has a larger diameter blood vessel called the afferent arteriole and a smaller diameter blood vessel called the efferent arteriole. So once again you have the afferent arteriole which is larger, and you have the smaller diameter which is efferent arteriole. From the glomerulus, the urine will be filtered out through the blood. So there is blood in the glomerulus. That filtered blood will be called the urine. It has to pass into the Bowman's capsule. So this is the proximal end which is blind. I told you there is no hole in it. It filters through it. So blood has to filter out through the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule, then it enters the nephron. So the proximal part is blind, which is the Bowman's capsule, and the end, that is the DCT, opens into the collecting tubule. So what are the actual parts of the nephron? I told you first you have the Bowman's capsule. You have a narrow region called the neck. The neck is the junction between the Bowman's capsule and the rest of the renal tubule. So the renal tubule has the first part which is highly coiled, called the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. From the proximal convoluted tubule, the urine will now enter into the Henle's loop. The Henle's loop consists of thin walled descending limb. It consists of this turn called the hairpin bend. It consists of a thick walled ascending limb, and only thick walled ascending limb, it is thick, so it is impermeable to water. Now what happens to that ascending limb? So if you see the ascending limb over here, it now goes into the DCT, and where is this DCT present? I told you in the cortex. Okay, so the DCT is highly coiled again in the cortex. From the DCT, the urine will now go into the collecting tubule. From there it goes into the collecting ducts, and finally from the collecting ducts it goes into the duct of Bellini. And here I told you the duct of Bellini ultimately opens at the apex of each pyramid. From there the urine will go into the minor calyx, the major calyx, pelvis, ureter, urinary bladder, urethra, and out of the body. Let us discuss the blood vessels also. You have the larger diameter afferent, smaller diameter efferent. Efferent does not end here. So efferent forms a network of capillaries called the peritubular capillaries. The peritubular capillaries, especially around the Henle's loop, is called the vasa recta. So vasa recta is only associated with the Henle's loop. The function of the Henle's loop is concentration of urine. So I hope you have understood the different components. This image will be sent on your group. Homework is you have to draw this image neatly in your book. So as I said, you can take a blank page. The upper part you can draw the LS of the kidney. The lower part you can draw this image. This will give you clarity of the different parts. So once again, the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule form the Malpighian corpuscle. The Malpighian corpuscle continues as the renal tubule. The junction of that is called the neck. The first part of the renal tubule is the PCT. Second part is the Henle's loop. Henle's loop has a descending limb, hairpin turn, and an ascending limb. The descending limb is thin walled. I have shown a little thinner. Ascending limb is thicker and it is impermeable to water. From the ascending limb, the urine will now enter into the DCT, which is once again in the cortex. From the DCT, it goes into the collecting tubule, collecting ducts, and then into the duct of Bellini. Therefore, what all is present in the cortex? I told you this black line is the junction between the cortex and the medulla. So what all lies in the cortex? You have the Malpighian corpuscle, the PCT and the DCT are in the cortex, whereas the Henle's loop lies in the medulla. So we have completed this answer called the structure of the nephron. We go to the next topic, which is the Malpighian corpuscle. So in case of the Malpighian corpuscle, the first part we are discussing is the Bowman's capsule. Okay. Now if you look at that image over there, the Bowman's capsule is this portion, it's like a cap. It has got an outer parietal layer and the depression is the inner part. The inner part is called the visceral layer. It is the proximal blind end of the nephron. As I said, there is no actual opening. The filtered blood will pass through the cells of the visceral layer. So this outer part is called the outer parietal layer and this inner part is the inner visceral layer. So I will draw it in a little bit of color over here so that you get the understanding. So this outer part is the outer parietal layer, which I have drawn it in blue, the outer parietal layer, and the visceral layer is the inner part, which I am drawing it in black. So you have outer parietal layer and the inner visceral layer. It is the initial proximal blind portion which does not have any opening. It is the widest part of the nephron. It has two walls, as I said, outer parietal, inner visceral, and it is cup shaped with a cup shaped depression. Outer parietal, inner visceral, and both the layers have squamous epithelium. So it's flat cells. So outer parietal is also having squamous cells, inner layer is also having squamous cells, but those inner squamous cells, they are modified. Between the outer and the inner there is a space. So between the blue and the black line, this space is called the capsular space. Once again, between the outer blue parietal layer and the inner black visceral layer, the space is called the capsular space or the urinary space, because it will be filled with urine once filtration occurs. And then this capsular space is continuous with the renal tubule, means the urine from the capsular space will now go into the neck, PCT, Henle's loop, DCT and so forth. So it is continuous with the renal tubule. Now see the next part. What about the glomerulus? The glomerulus consists of two blood vessels which are very prominent. So between the cup shaped space, so this is the cup shaped depression formed by the visceral layer, the black line, lies a network of blood capillaries called the glomerulus. So this entire network over here inside the black visceral layer is called the glomerulus. It receives blood from a larger diameter afferent arteriole, A for afferent, but the blood leaves it through a smaller diameter efferent arteriole. They are branches of the renal artery. I told you the dorsal aorta gives branches called renal arteries. So renal artery, once it enters the kidney, if you have 1 million nephrons, that renal artery will break down to 1 million branches, 1 million afferent arteriole. Artery ka bachcha is an arteriole. So one renal artery enters one kidney. It divides into 1 to 1.2 million branches depending on the number of nephrons. So for one nephron, you have to have at least one, obviously, afferent arteriole. So one afferent arteriole enters in. It has a larger diameter. So say it gets 10 amount of blood. I am giving you a rough value. 10 amount of blood it gets in because it has a larger diameter. But efferent arteriole is thinner, means say it can only allow 7 to go out. 10 amount of blood is coming in, but only 7 can go out. That means 3 is trapped in the glomerulus. With every heartbeat, what happens? With every heartbeat, fresh blood, fresh 10 will come in, 7 is going out, 10 is coming in, 7 is going out. Means in the glomerulus, fluid is accumulating under high pressure, under high hydrostatic pressure. That high pressure causes filtration to occur. So once again, within the cup shaped space formed of the visceral layer, within that black line, visceral black line, lies a globular network of capillaries called the glomerulus, which is a branch, the thin branch, the afferent arteriole from the renal artery gives blood to the glomerulus, but a slightly thinner efferent arteriole carries blood away. So blood going in, afferent, blood coming out, see the arrow is ulta, efferent arteriole. There is an intimate connection between the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. This together is called the Malpighian corpuscle, the renal corpuscle, or the Pygmalion corpuscle. So there are multiple names for Malpighian body or Malpighian corpuscle. It's either called renal corpuscle or Pygmalion corpuscle. Kindly note, you have done a chapter about cockroach in structural organization. There it is Malpighian tubule, not Malpighian corpuscle. So Malpighian tubule is in the cockroach, whereas we have Malpighian corpuscles. So kindly note the difference, tubule in the cockroach and corpuscle in us. So once again, the Bowman's capsule, it is the initial blind end because there is no opening. It is wide portion. It has 2 layers. The outer, the one in the blue, is the parietal layer. The inner one is the visceral layer, and in between the 2 layers you have a capsular space. After that, the urine from the capsular space will enter the neck, will enter the PCT, Henle's loop, DCT and so on. Now kindly focus on the inner visceral layer. The inner visceral layer consists of modified squamous cells. Anyways, everything is squamous, but those modified squamous cells are called the podocytes. What are they called? Podocytes. So one podocyte which is present in the visceral layer, okay. So this is the black line which I have drawn here. This is the basement membrane, and then you have those modified cells. Those modified cells are like this, which gives those finger like or foot like projections. So this modified cell is called the podocyte. The foot like projections are called the pedicels to increase the surface area. So the pedicel are the foot like projections. Okay. Next, what about the glomerulus? Within the inner visceral layer, you have a network of blood capillaries called the glomerulus. The larger diameter afferent arteriole, which is the branch of the renal artery, will carry more blood in. I gave you an example of 10. But the smaller diameter efferent can only carry out 7. So, rest of the fluid accumulates in the glomerulus. So, with each heartbeat, more and more fluid accumulates in the glomerulus. This causes an increase in hydrostatic pressure. There is an intimate connection between the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. This connection between the two is called the Malpighian corpuscle, the renal corpuscle, or the Pygmalion corpuscle. So, we have completed the structure of the Malpighian corpuscle. Now, I have made a flow chart. Okay. So, this will help you even for MCQs. The same image is also there in your notes. So, first of all, you already know each nephron is made up of a Bowman's capsule and a renal tubule. Renal tubule has 3 parts: PCT, Henle's loop and DCT. The Henle's loop has descending limb, hairpin bend and ascending limb. So, a nephron consists of only Bowman's capsule and renal tubule till DCT. Whereas, what is a uriniferous tubule? Uriniferous tubule means a nephron along with its collecting tubule. So, once again, you know about a nephron. A nephron consists of Bowman's capsule and the renal tubule. Renal tubule consists of PCT, Henle's loop, DCT. So, all these parts plus its collecting tubule is now called a uriniferous tubule. So, kindly note this point for MCQs. So, uriniferous tubule is equal to the nephron with its collecting tubule. We go to the next part, which is the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Now, this diagram looks very scary. I will give you a modified version of it later. So, understand this now. Imagine this portion is the Bowman's capsule. This is the PCT. My wrist is the PCT. This is Henle's loop and my shoulder is the DCT. So, what will happen now? Now, normally in the diagram I showed you everything is opened out nicely. But in reality it is not so. Imagine in that small kidney to accommodate 1.2 million nephrons and other things also. So, everything is all cluttered up, it is all overlapping. So, actually see how it is. Can you see this Bowman's capsule is actually very close to the DCT. Bowman's capsule, PCT, Henle's loop, DCT. DCT and the Bowman's capsule lie close to each other. And what is in that Bowman's capsule? The glomerulus. So, there is a dense connection between them, between the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule and the DCT. So, this is a very important MCQ. The DCT, not PCT, PCT is niche, DCT is just there next to it. The distal convoluted tubule lies very close to the glomerulus of the same nephron and forms a complex structure called the JGA, juxtaglomerular apparatus. Once again, the DCT and the glomerulus of the same nephron, they form the JGA. They release an enzyme called renin. So in the chapter of digestion, there also you have renin, which converts that milk casein into para-casein, but that has two N's in it. There are two N's, R-E-N-N-I-N. This chapter there is only one N, R-E-N-I-N. So in MCQs, please note the difference between R-E-N-N-I-N and R-E-N-I-N. So here the cells of juxtaglomerular apparatus, they secrete the enzyme renin that controls the blood pressure. It has three components which you can see here: macula densa, juxtaglomerular cells and the Lacis cells. Now what is macula densa? Now over here in this image, macula densa are the cells of the DCT, the distal convoluted tubule. Here the DCT portion I have drawn it in black color. So this is a much more simplified diagram which I had personally drawn. So the black portion is the macula densa. Can you see here? The first part is macula densa. So the cells of the DCT that come in contact with this red portion, the red portion are the afferent and the efferent arterioles. Those are comparatively much more denser than the other cells. So those cells which are very dense of the DCT, that's why I've used the same color. So the cells of the DCT which are much more dense than the rest of the cells, they are called macula densa. So macula densa, D for DCT. Second, the juxtaglomerular cells, I have done it in red. So you have a larger diameter afferent arteriole, smaller diameter efferent arteriole. So can you see these cells of both afferent and efferent, especially these cells which come in contact with DCT, which are in contact with DCT, and I put a lot of dots in it. The dots are those granules which ultimately produce inactive renin. So the juxtaglomerular cells of juxtaglomerular apparatus are the cells of afferent and efferent arterioles which contain those small granules, those dark granules containing inactive renin. So the red portion is the juxtaglomerular cells. The black portion is the macula densa of DCT, and in dono ke beech mein, can you see this light green faded thing? Very thin cells. You know, this fabric is there called lace, L-A-C-E. So you have it in dresses, you can have it in the curtains. So it kind of looks like lace. So it's called, these fine cells are called the Lacis cells because they have a lace like network and they fill in the gap, can you see this, between the macula densa of DCT and this red juxtaglomerular cells of the afferent and efferent arterioles. So green fills up the gap between them. The function is unknown, they are just supporting cells. So what is the juxtaglomerular apparatus for? The juxtaglomerular apparatus is made up of the DCT and the glomerulus of the same nephron. They produce the hormone or the enzyme called as renin, which also controls the urination. It controls blood pressure, it controls the fluid volumes. It contains three parts. The black part is macula densa of the DCT. The red part is the juxtaglomerular cells of the afferent and the efferent arterioles, and in between them you have the Lacis cells which fill up the gap between the macula densa and the juxtaglomerular cells. Now, right now underline this line, they are found only in juxtamedullary nephrons and not in cortical nephrons. So, what are juxtamedullary nephrons? These have long Henle loops. So, these nephrons having long Henle loops, these are called juxtaglomerular, or the longer nephrons are called the juxtamedullary nephrons, and you have this JGA only found in those longer juxtamedullary nephrons. So, JGA is mainly seen in juxtamedullary nephrons and not in cortical nephrons. So, this diagram also I will send it on the group. This is another image. Okay. So, here you can see the larger diameter afferent arteriole and the smaller diameter efferent arteriole, and here you have the associations. Okay. So, you have the glomerulus that is seen, but the image which I have sent you, that is a much better one. We go to the next topic, which are types of nephrons. So, in this image you have two types of nephrons. You have some nephrons which are very short, that means Henle's loop is not very long. So, these shorter nephrons are called cortical nephrons because it appears as if most of it lies only in the cortex, hardly anything is in the medulla. Such nephrons are called the cortical nephrons. And here I will like to draw a line, just draw a line over here and write this surface of the kidney or the cortex. Whereas here, this is the juxtamedullary nephron. This juxtamedullary nephron has a long Henle's loop which goes deep into the medulla. So, a very large portion of it is in the medulla. These are called the juxtamedullary nephrons. Now, look at even the Malpighian corpuscle, the positions are not the same. Can you see this dotted line? This dotted line stands for the junction of the cortex and the medulla. Look at the juxtamedullary nephrons. Can you see Bowman's capsule is more towards the junction of cortex and medulla? Whereas in cortical nephron, the Bowman's capsule is more towards the surface, just below the surface of the kidney. So, even the positioning of the Bowman's capsule is different, even the lengths of the Henle's loop are different. So, easier way to learn this answer is like a difference between. Okay, so there are two types of nephrons. You have your juxtamedullary nephrons and your cortical nephrons. So, percentage wise, actually most of the nephrons are cortical nephrons, around 85%. So, most of the nephrons have a very short Henle's loop, they are cortical. Very few are actually the long ones, which are juxtamedullary. So, cortical, remember 85%, automatically you will know this value. Where are the Malpighian corpuscles present? I told you, close to the kidney surface, and here it is close to the junction between the cortex and the medulla. Henle's loop is short, Henle's loop is long. Because they have a long Henle's loop, they have a very prominent vasa recta, proper nice long vasa recta. Whereas here you can't make out the vasa recta because Henle's loop is only so short. From where you will figure out the vasa recta. So, here understand cortical nephrons are more often. The reason is because in normal conditions they are the main ones which control your plasma volume. We are always in normal conditions. We are rarely stranded in the middle of the desert. So only in very, very bad cases where there is severe dehydration, when there is really less water in the body, that's when these nephrons get activated. So once again, which ones are active most of the time in your body? They are the cortical nephrons, therefore they are maximum in number. 85% of the nephrons are cortical nephrons. They are active under normal conditions to regulate your blood fluid volumes. They are located more close to the kidney surface. They have a short Henle's loop and you cannot make out the vasa recta. On the other hand, the juxtamedullary nephrons, they are only 15% because they are only applicable when there is low fluid volume, when there is severe water shortage. So they are only 15% because they are required only in severe cases of water deficiency. The Malpighian corpuscle lies close to the surface in case of cortical nephrons, whereas in case of juxtamedullary nephrons, it lies close to the junction of the cortex and the medulla. They have a long Henle's loop and they have a very prominent vasa recta. So we have completed even the types of nephrons. We go to the next part, which is the blood supply to the kidneys. So there is this flow chart over here. So this image is very important. Please put 5 stars to it. So how does blood flow in the kidneys? So first of all, your main organs, over here I am drawing the heart. From the heart, oxygenated blood goes into the dorsal aorta. I told you the dorsal aorta gives the branches called the renal arteries. One renal artery enters into one kidney and then it splits into those afferent arterioles. This arrow, cancel it from here and put it over here. The larger diameter afferent arteriole enters the glomerulus and what leaves it is the efferent arteriole. The efferent arteriole continues as the peritubular capillaries and the vasa recta. And finally, the blood, the purified blood enters into those small venules, which then comes out of the kidney as the renal vein. That's why if you see, out of all the blood vessels, not capillaries, we are not talking capillaries, we are talking blood vessels, arteries and veins. The renal vein has the lowest urea because the kidneys purified the blood. The blood that entered into the kidneys. So if I put a dotted line like this, okay, till here. So you have the heart, you have the kidneys. So oxygenated blood from the heart goes into the dorsal aorta, it goes into the renal artery. So the renal artery is giving oxygen and urea to the kidneys. One renal artery splits into 1.2 million afferent arterioles for each glomerulus. From there the blood comes out as the efferent arteriole, which continues as the peritubular capillaries, the vasa recta. The blood then goes into the small venules and finally the small venules will converge to form the renal vein. But now understand, from the kidneys the ureter carried out urine with urea. So what comes out of the kidney? The ureter is carrying out the urea. So the blood which comes out of the kidney is very pure because it has no toxic chemicals in it. The kidney has filtered the blood. So the blood that entered the kidney had nitrogenous waste. But what did the kidney do? It filters out the nitrogenous waste. So when it filters out the nitrogenous waste, the ureter carries the urea in it. So the blood vessel renal vein has the least urea concentration, the purest blood with respect to nitrogenous waste. But then what happens? Renal veins, they join the inferior vena cava, which ultimately goes back to the heart. But understand, inferior vena cava receives blood even from your legs. It receives blood from all your abdominal organs, including the liver. So let's consider what happens in the liver. In the first lecture itself, I told you that proteins break down to form amino acids. Amino acids will undergo deamination to form ammonia in the liver. So liver is so important. First step is deamination occurs in the liver. Second, that ammonia then goes into the ornithine cycle and even makes urea. So what supplies the liver is the hepatic artery. Hepatic artery is carrying the oxygen and the amino acids to the liver. So the hepatic artery carries oxygen and amino acids to the liver. In the liver, deamination takes place to form ammonia, and then that ammonia gets converted to urea, and now that urea comes out of the liver. Understand, the hepatic vein has the largest urea concentration because the liver only is producing urea. Because the liver produces urea, the blood vessel coming out of the liver, that is your hepatic vein, will have maximum urea. But then even that gets mixed up in the inferior vena cava. So ultimately in the inferior vena cava, everything gets mixed up. Not only the blood from the kidneys or the liver, but even your other organs ka blood will mix up in the inferior vena cava. So in the MCQ, if they ask you which blood vessel has the least urea, it is renal vein, because just now the kidney filtered it. Which blood vessel has the maximum urea is the hepatic vein, because the liver produces urea. So blood coming out of the liver contains the maximum urea, which is your hepatic vein. Blood coming out of the kidney has minimum urea because the kidneys filtered the urea out. So the renal vein has the lowest urea, the hepatic vein has the largest urea. These two, put a star for it. This is what they ask. They have asked in NEET this question. Hepatic vein, maximum urea, renal vein, minimum urea. So one last time, from the heart, the dorsal aorta gives two branches called the renal arteries, which enter each kidney. So that one renal artery entering the kidney divides into 1 to 1.2 million nephrons. So those, for the nephrons, you have the afferent arterioles. Larger diameter afferent arteriole enters the glomerulus, and the smaller diameter efferent arteriole will exit it. The efferent arteriole continues as peritubular capillaries or the vasa recta. These then continue as the venules. These small venules now join to form the renal vein, which has the least urea because the kidney just filtered out the urea. Urea has gone out through the ureter. So the renal vein has the least urea. the blood from the renal vein now goes into the inferior vena cava. The liver receives the oxygen and the amino acids from the hepatic artery. Inside the liver, first point you have deamination, second point you have the ornithine cycle which produces urea. Therefore, the blood vessel coming out of the liver, which is your hepatic vein, will have maximum urea, because liver produces urea. Blood vessel coming out of the liver will have maximum urea. So once again, MCQ, which blood vessel has least urea? Hepatic vein or renal vein or aorta or IVC. Your answer for least is your renal vein, and if the answer is for maximum urea, it will be your hepatic vein. So they can give you any 4 options. You should know hepatic vein from the liver has maximum urea and renal vein from the kidney has minimum urea, because later on everything mixes up in the IVC and dorsal aorta. So in MCQs, these 2 are the ones which are asked: renal vein least urea, hepatic vein maximum urea. So the renal artery arises from the dorsal aorta. This is the explanation. In the kidney, the renal artery divides to form the afferent arterioles which enter into the Bowman's capsule. What enters? Afferent. What leaves is efferent. So afferent has a larger diameter, efferent has a smaller diameter. So a larger diameter afferent enters the Bowman's capsule, I told you, carrying 10 amount of urine, and smaller diameter efferent leaves it. This increases the pressure inside the glomerulus. The efferent later continues as peritubular capillaries and the vasa recta. Now the renal veins will form, the renal venules will form the renal vein which opens into the IVC. Hence renal vein has the least amount of urea, but the hepatic vein leaving the liver will have maximum urea because the liver itself produces urea. So this is a very, very important topic. In your NCERT textbooks, the 2 topics of mechanism of urine formation and the function are 2 separate topics, but in our notes we have taught the structure and the function together. That's why we have combined the 2 topics, 19.2 and 19.3. What are the 3 principles of urine formation? A very, very important answer. The first principle of urine formation is ultrafiltration. The second is tubular secretion and the selective reabsorption. In this lecture, we will be only doing the first principle, which is ultrafiltration. So once again, there are 3 principles: ultrafiltration, selective reabsorption, tubular secretion. We start with ultrafiltration. Now, do you remember the structure of the Malpighian corpuscle? I told you there is a larger diameter afferent arteriole and a smaller diameter efferent arteriole. So there is a difference between the diameters. So I told you that 10 amount of blood comes in, 7 blood can go out through the efferent. So 3 accumulates in the glomerulus. Now each time your heart beats, again 10 comes in, 7 goes out, 10 comes in, 7 goes out. But inside the glomerulus, that 3 has become 6, 6 has become 9, it keeps on increasing. This high hydrostatic pressure of fluid inside the glomerulus will cause the glomerulus to stretch. When the glomerulus stretches, now the blood will start filtering out. This is called ultrafiltration. The first step of urine formation is the filtration of blood, which is carried out by the glomerulus. It occurs in the Malpighian corpuscle by the collective action of the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule. So there are three layers of filtration. The first is the inner lining of the capillaries of the glomerulus itself. See, the glomerulus is a tuft of capillaries. Capillaries only have a single layer of cells, squamous cells, through which filtration is possible. So this single layer of cells is called the endothelium of the glomerular blood vessels. Then you have the basement membrane, and finally you have the epithelium of the Bowman's capsule. I told you, the visceral layer having the podocytes or the pedicels. So there are three layers through which the filtration occurs. So if you remember, the glomerulus, you have the larger diameter afferent arteriole, you have a smaller diameter efferent arteriole, and between that you have the glomerulus. This is the glomerulus. So the first part is the endothelium of the glomerular blood vessels. Endothelium. Second is the basement membrane. So in your notes, this basement membrane is point number C. And the point number B is the podocyte. The podocytes are the cells of the Bowman's capsule. So podocytes are the cells of the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. So the filtration membrane has three layers. First is the inner walls of the glomerulus, which is the endothelium. Second, the blue layer, which is the basement membrane, and third are the podocytes, the visceral layer of the Bowman's capsule. So the epithelial cells of the Bowman's capsule are called podocytes. They are arranged in intricate manner to leave the minute spaces called filtration slits or pores. So where are the filtration slits? So already I have drawn one podocyte. I will draw another podocyte over here. So between the two cells, this gap is called the filtration slits. I will be sending this image separately on the groups. So blood is filtered so finely through these membranes that the cells cannot pass through of blood. Blood contains RBCs, WBCs and platelets. The cells cannot pass. The fluid of your blood is called plasma. So can plasma pass out? Yes, but in plasma, plasma proteins are large in size. So even plasma proteins cannot pass through these filtration membranes. So the fluid that actually filters is called deproteinized plasma or primary urine. Okay, so the blood filters finally through these three membranes. Which are the three membranes? The endothelium of the glomerulus, second the basement membrane, and third are the podocytes of the Bowman's capsule. As the filtration occurs, RBCs, WBCs, platelets and even plasma proteins, these being large in size, they cannot be filtered out. So the fluid that filters out, that fluid is called deproteinized plasma or proteinless plasma, or it is also called primary urine or glomerular filtrate. In the bracket here, please write down primary urine, because it is not the final composition of urine, it will be modified. Finally, this primary urine will be collected in the capsular space of the Bowman's capsule. Next, you have this particular flow chart. What is the cardiac output? The cardiac output is 5 liters. Now, what is this cardiac output in 1 minute? In 1 minute, how much of blood is pumped out of each ventricle? Now, consider you have a right ventricle and your left ventricle. From the left ventricle, blood goes to all parts of the body, including the kidneys. So, what is the cardiac output? Cardiac output is 5 liters, which will go to all parts of the body. But out of that 5 liters, 20 to 25% goes directly to the kidneys for filtration. That's a huge amount for any one organ. Because there are so many other body parts, you imagine 20 to 25% goes only to the kidneys for filtration. That is the importance of the kidneys. So, if you consider from 5000 ml, on an average, it is around 1100 to 1200 ml of blood is filtered per minute. We are talking about everything occurs per minute. So, 5 liters of blood comes out of the heart per minute, and out of that 20 to 25% is filtered by the kidneys. So, how much of blood goes to the kidneys? 1100 to 1200, that is around 20 to 25% of the cardiac output. But this is blood. In blood, I told you that there are cells like RBCs, WBCs and platelets. They constitute 45% of the cells. So, cells have RBCs, WBCs and platelets. Can these be filtered into the urine? No. Of the total blood, 45% are cells and 55% is plasma. That means, what is 55% of this amount of blood? They have taken an average of this value, it is 650 ml. So, 55% of this blood which enters the kidney is 650 ml, which we call the renal plasma flow. So, once again, 5 liters of blood come out of the heart per minute. From that 5 liters, 20 to 25% of blood goes only to the kidneys, which is 1100 to 1200 ml. From that 1100 to 1200 ml of blood, it also contains cells which are never filtered out. The plasma is 55% of this. They have taken an average value of 650 ml, which is 55% of this. So 650 ml is the renal plasma flow, is the amount of fluid that filters out. However, they have actually estimated the rate of glomerular filtration. Now, what is that glomerular filtration? The actual fluid which entered through the afferent arteriole is 650 ml per minute, but out of that 650 ml per minute, how much actually filters out into the Bowman's capsule is the 125 ml, that is called GFR. Only 125 ml. I told you 10 comes in, 7 goes out. So what remains? That gets filtered. So here what is being filtered? The part which is being filtered, that filtration part is 125 ml. So what is filtration fraction? Filtration fraction is 125 ml out of 650. That is 1/5 or 20%. So that is how you get 20% is the filtration fraction. So once again I will repeat this chart. The amount of blood which comes out of your heart to supply all organs is 5 liters per minute or cardiac output. 5 liters of blood per minute is cardiac output. Out of that 5 liters, 20 to 25% goes to the kidneys, which is your renal blood flow. So how much blood goes to the kidneys is 1100 to 1200, but that blood also has cells. So what is the plasma fraction? The renal plasma flow is 55% of this is only 650 ml. So imagine this much plasma is available for filtration, but actually how much gets filtered is only 125 ml. So what is filtration fraction? Filtration fraction is 125 ml upon 650 ml, that is approximately 1/5, that is 20%. Okay, so this table is important. If we consider it is 125 ml per minute, now think about it. If you multiply it for 1 day, we have to produce 180 liters of urine per day, which is a huge amount. It's impossible. We'll have to be sitting in the washroom the whole day, because they are saying we have to throw out, as per the filtration rates, 125 ml per minute means 180 liters per day. Our body has very less amount of fluid. You have around 5 liters of blood in your body. You cannot afford to throw out 180 liters of urine per day. A person will die within no time. That means that ultrafiltration has a problem. It loses too much of water. That's why God has blessed us with such a nice nephron. You have a PCT, you have a Henle's loop, you have a DCT to correct the mistakes of ultrafiltration. What is the rate of ultrafiltration? 125 ml per minute or 180 liters of urine per day, which is impossible. So you have your other two principles, selective reabsorption, tubular secretion, which will correct the mistakes of ultrafiltration. How do you estimate the effective filtration pressure? There are three properties which will control the pressure by which the filtration actually occurs. So first you have the glomerular hydrostatic pressure. I told you that you have a larger diameter afferent arteriole, smaller diameter efferent arteriole. So 10 amount of blood comes in, 7 amount of blood goes out. 3 amount of blood remains stuck in the glomerulus. Now in the next heartbeat again 10 is coming in, 7 is going out. So inside now you have 6. Next heartbeat again 10 is coming in, 7 is going out. Now inside there is 9. Means in each heartbeat more and more fluid accumulates inside the glomerulus. So there is an increase in the hydrostatic pressure inside the glomerulus. This is called glomerular hydrostatic pressure. So once again, larger diameter afferent, smaller diameter efferent. The difference between the two diameters causes an accumulation of fluid inside that glomerulus. So inside the glomerulus, the pressure keeps on increasing. This high pressure causes filtration to occur. This pressure is called the glomerular hydrostatic pressure. It is the blood pressure in the glomerular capillaries. It is the chief determinant of the effective filtration pressure due to the difference in the diameters of the afferent and the efferent arterioles. It drives or it causes filtration. The value is 55 mm of mercury. So pressure is normally measured with respect to mm of mercury. So what is the pressure which causes ultrafiltration? The driving force is the glomerular hydrostatic pressure due to the difference in diameters of the afferent and the efferent. The value is 55 mm of Hg. Next, but there are two forces which do not want this to occur. So there are two opposing forces now. Let me explain. The first one is the colloidal osmotic pressure of blood, or the BCOP, the blood colloidal osmotic pressure. Now first of all, inside blood there is an affinity, there is a love between plasma and plasma proteins and the solutes. I told you plasma proteins are large molecules, they cannot filter out. So you imagine there is a mother and a child, their mother is taking the child to the school. Child doesn't want to leave the mother, there is a love between them. So mother wants to leave the child at the school and go for her work, but child is clinging on to the mother. So like that you have to understand, plasma wants to go, plasma wants to be filtered out, but plasma protein is like that child holding on to the mother. Plasma protein is not allowing the separation between the plasma protein and the plasma because of the affinity, because of the forces of attraction between the plasma proteins and plasma. So that is the blood colloidal osmotic pressure. So it is the osmotic pressure created in the blood of the capillaries due to underlying the plasma proteins which resist the filtration. So plasma proteins do not want plasma to separate from it. This opposing pressure is 30 mm of Hg. And finally, capsular hydrostatic pressure. Now I do not know whether you ever travelled in a train. So imagine you are standing at the railway platform, the train comes. So say there are 20 people who want to get into your train coach. 20 people want to get in. The capacity inside is 30. Capacity inside is say 30. 20 people want to get in, all hope to get in. But when the train comes, The train coach has a capacity of 30, only 5 people can get in because 25 have already come from the previous stations. So not everyone get to go in because the train coach was already occupied from the previous station. Same way, understand, your heart beats every 0.8 seconds. Less than a second your heart keeps on beating. In the previous heartbeat also there was filtration, and now again in this heartbeat again there is filtration. It is possible that the Bowman's capsule containing urine has not completely removed out the fluid into the PCT. मतलब पिछले filtration का fluid अभी भी बाकी है in the Bowman's capsule. So like that railway coach which has come with already people from the previous stations, understand that your Bowman's capsule also contains fluid from the previous filtration. It's not empty. So even if fluid wants to come, it cannot completely come until that Bowman's capsule is completely evacuated. So the Bowman's capsule also contains fluid, and that already existing fluid of previous filtration will resist new entry of fluid. You know, for example, if I had to enter at Andheri, so people are already standing over there from Borivali. So Borivali people will stand at the train and not allow me to enter. They resist the entry of new molecules. So same way I am saying that the fluid of previous filtration is not completely gone from there. So it resists the entry of new fluid from entering. So that is called capsular hydrostatic pressure because of the fluid in the Bowman's capsule. That value is 15. So what is your net effective pressure is 55 minus 30 minus 15. Therefore, you get your effective pressure as 10 mm of mercury. So how do you get your effective pressure? I told you glomerular hydrostatic pressure is 55. It is the pressure caused by the difference between diameters of afferent and efferent. It wants filtration to occur, 55. But there is love between plasma and plasma proteins that prevents the plasma from separating out. The blood colloidal osmotic pressure, which is 30 mm of mercury. There is also fluid in the Bowman's capsule from the previous filtration. This is capsular hydrostatic pressure. So 55 minus 30 minus 15, your effective actual filtration pressure is only 10 mm of mercury. So that is how, with this effective pressure of 10 mm of mercury, your filtration rate is 125 ml per minute or 180 liters per day. This will be corrected in the following steps of tubular secretion and selective reabsorption. So what are the three membranes through which it has to pass through? Let's revise. First, I told you this red part, the endothelium of the glomerulus. Second, the blue basement membrane. Third, the podocytes of the visceral layer of the Bowman's capsule. Between the cells, there are the filtration slits which also help the fluid to pass through. The fluid that passes does not contain RBCs, WBCs, platelets. They do not even have plasma proteins. So this fluid is called the glomerular filtrate or protein-less plasma or deproteinized plasma or the primary urine. 5 liters of blood is pumped out every minute. From that 5 liters, around 20 to 25% go to the kidneys. That 20 to 25% means 1100 to 1200 ml of blood. But in that blood, only 55% is plasma. So 55% of this they have taken the value as 650 ml. So 650 ml of plasma enters into the kidney and how much ultimately comes out is 125 ml gets filtered out. So filtration fraction is 125 ml upon 650 ml, that is 20%. 1 upon 5 is 20%. Your glomerular hydrostatic pressure is 55, blood colloidal osmotic pressure is 30 and capsular hydrostatic pressure is 15. Therefore, net effective filtration pressure is 10 mm of Hg. So, we have completed the first principle. So, these are the copy of your notes. We have completed this part. We have completed this flow chart. So, filtration fraction is GFR upon the renal plasma flow 125 ml per minute upon 650 ml, 1 upon 5 or 20%. So, we have completed with the first principle. So, as you can see, the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure is the difference caused because of the difference in diameters between the afferent and the efferent. So, there is an increase in hydrostatic pressure in the glomerulus. But inside the blood plasma, there is a force of attraction between the plasma and the plasma proteins. Also, the capsule has fluid from the previous filtration. So, that is how your net effective filtration pressure is only 10 mm of Hg. So, in this lecture, we have covered up a lot of topics. We covered the structure of the nephron, Malpighian corpuscle, juxtaglomerular apparatus. In that we did those 3 types of cells, the juxtaglomerular cells, the Lacis cells, the macula densa. We discussed difference between cortical nephrons and your juxtamedullary nephrons. We discussed even the blood supply to the kidneys, that renal vein has the least urea and hepatic vein has the maximum urea. And now we have discussed the first principle of urine formation, which is ultrafiltration. So, this lecture is a little long lecture. Kindly solve the MCQs regarding these topics which I have covered. So, in the next lecture, we will continue with the principles of urine formation. Thank you.